Is Ford really undervalued compared to the rest of the industry at the moment? Today, we're going to take a quick look at some of the reasons it might be undervalued, along with some of the price targets we have, and some other concerns we should keep our eyes on too for the future. Now, you guys know I freaking love me some Tesla, both the stock and the products, and to be honest, I've been looking down on Ford for a little while, but that may be about to change based on a lot of the new info we got from the Investors Day earlier today, on top of the already low valuation, which kind of surprised me. On the back of a super rough year for most automakers, we saw inventories piling up on the back of super low sales, spurred on by lockdowns and the potential for a large amount of the population to be able to shift from working at home and not really needing a car anymore. So in Ford's case, second quarter of 2020, we saw their gross profits drop from 3.8 billion down to 1.4 billion, which is disgusting, actually. And in the last quarter of 2020, Ford's net income figures were starting to look downright terrifying. Check out these quarterly net income figures and how erratic they are. The auto industry is typically quite cyclical, with strong summer revenues and rough winters, but the pandemic has really compounded things. But check out the chart movement after that quarter. We hit a low of about $4 in March, and the sentiment was terrible, but that's all changed. And as you can see, today, we just hit a high we haven't hit, I think, since 2016. I wish I'd gotten this video out before Investors Day, as I was getting pretty excited about the potential of the company and the lowish valuation. And I wish somebody opened my eyes to it back, a few months ago when it was like $4. But first, let's take a look at some of the figures, and then we can look at some of the prospects on the horizon as well. First, it's important for us to keep in mind that the new CEO on board, Jim Farley, has been making moves since October 2020 when he started, and he seems to be a bit more forward thinking with a strong kind of orientation towards tech, much more so than any of the old guard of Detroit, I think. And he's interested in joining up to the standard that Tesla's kind of set, I think. So let's take a look at the financial health of the company. I'll zoom a bit into the quarterly charts for this portion, and hopefully we can see some trends brought on by Farley, though it may be a bit early. Comparing assets to liabilities on the balance sheet, we see a slowly improving ratio, though the juncture Ford's at with having to invest heavily into new tech isn't one we should be expecting to see like cash and cash equivalents starting to pile up anytime soon. While it's hard to factor in Ford's entire global restructuring costs, which they've been doing for a little while now, they'll be using cash now to downsize their operations in areas like Europe in order to boost profits down the line. And investors are going to have to just deal with reduced cash flow as a result for the time being. That being said, the Mustang Mach-E sales seem to be going pretty well, and the F-150 Lightning they just announced has already amassed, I think, 70 or 80,000 pre-orders, which is a super huge boon to Ford's not super awesome prospects that they were having even like a half a year ago or a year ago. The income statement shows improving gross profits and net incomes, especially compared to the last year. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of pent-up demand has been responsible for that due to lockdowns, but I also think a lot of Ford's newer offerings are just straight up surprising a lot of people. One of the facts that really surprised me from the Investors Day was that 70% of the Mach-E's early buyers are new to Ford. Like they've straight up never owned a Ford before, and they're like, wow, that looks cool, I want one. And we've kind of only seen Tesla doing that as far as EVs go on the worldwide market. So that shows tremendous promise, I think, for Ford looking forward. Taking a quick look at some of the valuation metrics compared to competitors, here's a little chart for you. After the big jump yesterday, the stock price jumped like 8%, I think it was. It doesn't appear to be showing anything like super ultra fascinating for us in the moment for Ford, but the price you're paying for sales is definitely very low. Check it out here. EV to EBITDA is not super different from the peers like GM, Honda, Toyota, Volkswagen, or Tesla. Well, Tesla's a whole different story, but check out the price to sales ratio from the trailing 12 months. Ford is actually really low, and the closest competitor is Honda, who, as far as EVs goes, doesn't have anything like Ford, nor does it have anything that will appeal to Americans like Ford does. Honda does have some, solid growth happening, but as far as EVs go and kind of the roadmap they've laid out for the future doesn't look nearly as promising as Ford's does. But the other factor that we need to consider going forward for valuations is the expectations that they set from the Investor Day. Here's a chart showing Ford revenue and EBITDA estimates for the future. There are big expectations for the 2021 year, but there are even greater ones for 2022. In the Investor Days presentation, they announced a bunch of different exciting tidbits of information, including number one, they're going to be boosting the EV research and development spending by over $8 billion over their previous plans, up to more than $30 billion by 2025. And on top of that, while they've been aiming for an EBIT of 8% for like years, it finally looks like they're going to start hitting that. On top of the F-150 Lightning and the Mustang Mach-E, who already seem to be receiving like really solid welcomes from the market, it seems like they have a few more surprises up their sleeves in the coming months. And I really wouldn't be surprised if we saw continued EV expansion into their other offerings like the Explorer and things like that. And I think when you start getting into Explorer territory, you're not only looking at a huge loyal fan base, but also law enforcement and stuff like that too. Ford's also shown us that they seem to be less terrified of the whole battery problem than a lot of other makers. Even Tesla repeatedly discusses openly how paralyzing the battery shortage is going to be in the coming years, but Ford also shows that they'll be investing heavily in their own battery production alongside their partner SK Innovation, and will hope to be bringing cost per kilowatt hour down to $80 by the end of the decade. So assuming we continue along this strong growth, this estimated almost $14.3 billion of EBITDA in 2022, multiplied by Ford's historical kind of EV EBITDA of about 13.65 from the last 10 years, we land at an enterprise value of about 195 billion. When compared against today's 178 billion, it's a potential upside of like 10% based on those estimates. And that works out to a share price of about 1550 or so for the next couple of years. Taking a look at some of the estimate figures from analysts, they're a little bit more optimistic. I personally am also a little bit more optimistic than just using, these estimates to make a valuation. A lot of the analysts are saying 16 to 18 bucks, which is like almost a 30% upside compared to the current prices we're at today. Now, obviously, a lot of this depends on the competition, whether or not Ford will be able to, keep reducing their overhead internationally, and also further expansion of its luxury brand Lincoln in China, which is apparently tearing it up and shown really good, robust growth. Since Ford's beating so many other players to the market with actual real-world usable EVs with good build quality, impressive driving characteristics, and range that satisfies Americans' needs, I wouldn't be surprised if Ford continues to grow even more rapidly than people are expecting. They're saying that by 2030, 40% of the world's cars are going to be pure EVs, but I super wouldn't be surprised if we end up 40% by like 2026 or something like that. Like the rate of adoption of EVs is going faster than I think a lot of these big players are expecting. So if Ford can cement their battery advantages over competitors, especially ones like GM, while slimming down the organization, I think investors are in for a treat in the next couple of years. I also wanted to go over a couple of the risks that we need to consider when investing in Ford. Number one would be unions. Ford has more workers in the United Auto Workers Union than any other major automaker in the US. Tesla, on the other hand, has successfully fended unionization off, which could potentially provide them with margin advantage that could scale into even greater leverage over the years. And that could spill out into other advantages as well. The second risk factor to keep in mind is the semiconductor shortage. 5 of the top 10 models in the US affected by this shortage have been Ford's, dude. They've been really clear that they're making big moves to introduce and fortify their Ford Plus plan, which aims to bring Ford back into relevance in terms of being able to do over-the-air updates like Tesla does, and software, securing their supply chain on the hardware front. In this video, I mentioned another plan that was introduced a few days ago that could also support the supply chain for chip makers in the US. This will have a massive benefit for lots of chip making companies, but will also spill over into beneficiaries like Ford as well. So please check that out if you have a minute. So while there's lots of room for growth in the market, and it's clear that not everybody only wants Teslas. Coming off the back of a rough last year, powered by the leadership of Farley and the strong launches of the Bronco, the F-150, the Mach-E, a promising pipeline of other vehicles, as well as charging infrastructure, investors could be in for an exciting ride with Ford in the coming years. Personally, I've been in and out of Ford over the years, but don't currently own any. I'm in the habit of researching different industries regularly, and this opportunity kind of popped up alongside the whole Investors Day that just came up. And to be honest, I was inches from loading up yesterday in hopes of making a cheeky like $1 or $2, which would have worked out really well. I'm really interested to see how the price moves, especially in the coming years with the potential re-implementation of a dividend too. So if you've been holding Ford for a while, you're probably in a really good spot, and I would just keep holding on. And if you're thinking about buying into this type of stock, I think it's not a bad option. And I'd be happy buying in under $14 and like super happy under 12. But I'm personally a bit more excited about other options that are undervalued, like AMD or Nokia. And I've made series on both of those, which you can see up here and which you can see up here. Cut. What are your thoughts about Ford? You're going to be buying some more? You're going to be getting into it for the first time? Let me know down in the comments section. Also, we have started up a Patreon where I share my moves and I share a little bit more about my research and things like that. Love you guys. Stay generous.